just doing the London recap for you today. So in euro dollar on the daily, obviously the daily's bearish. We've been expecting this low to get run for a long time because it's weak, because it failed to put in a new swing high. We came into this demand just within the wick and we got the reaction, but the reaction, we just pulled back into the supply within this wick, and then the reaction failed and continued to the downside, which is pretty much what was expected. Like, we never thought this demand was going to cause anything more than a mild reaction, maybe pull back into supply before continuing down. But yeah, so I'd say I'd be shocked if the week low isn't running in the next couple of days. Now, this became a flip zone because obviously you reacted to this demand and then the reaction failed. But I have it refined to the pivot there, but obviously you have to be aware that it's actually the whole range. So we've pulled back into that now, so that may be enough to fuel the daily low getting run. On the 4 hour then, we had this, it was a bullish chalk yesterday, but it was basically just to mitigate some more within the supply. You can see that a lot, and then immediately we basically got a bearish chalk and this sort of minor internal low got taken out, which means we're sort of operating in this new range. This morning I was sort of anticipating the price might pull up to this flip zone and we would get the reaction from there, but there was these wicks as well that have contained price. Now obviously they're pretty minor, but I wouldn't be looking to trade them directly, but obviously they've contained price. There obviously is some orders within that. Yeah, the thing is, all this demand has been absorbed, which is why you've got this sort of violent move to the downside. So it's unlikely there's going to be any demand in here, or much demand left to cause sort of a decent pullback. So that's why I was sort of happy to count the 4 hour wicks as well, because I'm aware there's not that much demand, so it mightn't even be enough to pull back up into the supply zone nested in the daily. But yeah, 4 hour bearish, obviously expecting the low to be run. M15. This morning I had my eye on these two POIs up here, mainly because they were nested in the 4 hour, but then we had the 4 hour wicks as well, and then we had this M15 POI. It technically did sweep behind the inside bar. It's not my favourite sweep in the world, but it technically did sweep, and then obviously it was nested in the 4 hour wicks. It had already been mitigated and failed, but considering the 4 hour and M15 were both bearish, I was still happy to look for sells in this here as long as it wasn't spiked above, because the extreme of the M15 POIs are always high probability, because basically if the extreme doesn't hold, then the whole sort of trade idea is probably wrong. So it is a good place to be a bit more aggressive. And then obviously I'll show you in a moment here, we got in, I tried to get in up here, but it was just missed by a pip, less than a pip maybe on the entry on the M1. Then we got the M15 chalk, so this created this fresh supply zone. So then when we were coming down here, I wasn't really looking for any M1 continuations in here because they didn't fit my plan. They didn't sweep. My entry model for the M1 continuations is mitigate, liquidate and flip, and none of them really met those three criteria. But whenever price came back up into this M15 POI, I was very interested looking for sells, because obviously it caused the most recent shock, and then basically everything was aligned again to the downside. You had the 4 hour internal and swing were bearish, M15 swing and internal and bearish, so it's very good value, very good time to be a bit more aggressive with sells. On the M1 then, this was the first entry, sorry. This was the first entry. You can see we swept these sort of equal highs. We mitigated the refined M1 POI at the extreme of the M15. You can see it just there. Then what really sold me in this was the V-shaped recovery. Like, you can see a lot of momentum. That's your high probability entry. Like, that's what tells you that a lot of orders stepped into the market to push price that aggressively. So then basically there was no clear flip really, so it just entered on the extreme with a 2 pip stop, and then obviously covered the high, so it just tapped the distal and didn't hit, which was slightly annoying, but it is what it is. These are the sort of M1 continuations. Sort of started to get a bit of a supply chain here, but you can see this was probably the cleanest one. It reacted to that sort of M1, pushed back up, mitigated that there, so you have the mitigation, and then depends whether you count a wick break as a failed reaction or not. You would have had the flip as well. And personally, I would ideally like to see it close below the low rather than wick it, just because it gets more of a sign of momentum in the market. But that wouldn't have been valid for me, I know, even if it did close, because it didn't sweep. So none of those really fit my plan. I mean, mitigated this sort of demand here and pushed back up and came back up with a decent amount of momentum, but came into the M15 POI that caused the shock. So I was happy to look for sells within this. Yeah, I'll zoom in on this. You can see basically you had that sort of minor demand, price pushed up, pulled back into it. You had the flip where price reacted, but it didn't sweep. And then we got the chalk and a decent bit of a V shape, like, and it took out this low as well. So it is a sign of a decent amount of momentum stepping in the market. The flip didn't sweep, so I wasn't really confident entering solely on that. So what I did was just entered on basically the extreme buy to sell, basically anticipating that there would be something unmitigated within that in the seconds. The price might want to sweep the flip and then continue lower. In this case, I think it was a 15-second. Yeah, you can see you had that unmitigated 15-second candle there that with a nice bit of inducement in front of it with that flip. So you can see what played out there. Yeah, very happy with the trade, pretty textbook entry. We reacted to this M15 demand and pushed back up for that reason. Like, this made this POI here makes sense as an entry point, because it like mitigated this, and then this was the next mitigation. But just when you come off M15 supply, in this case, even if it was only wicks, that didn't cause much, or M15 demand, sorry, even if it was only wicks, it didn't cause much. I'm just reluctant to set a limit order against anything clear in the M15, especially when you get that amount of momentum. Like, if it pulled up back up very correctively like this here, maybe I might consider it, but just too much momentum for me. And then considering it was the M15 as well, and then it didn't give you a confirmation entry because there wasn't even a bullish chalk there. This all remained bearish within, and then sort of, if you're looking at an eye chalk, it would have been there. So there was no confirmation entry. Yeah, very nice trade, very happy with it. Yeah, I wasn't massively convinced that this demand was going to like push price higher, because yeah, it's a flip zone. It flipped this sort of supply here to demand, but it didn't really achieve much in terms of structure on like internal swing, both still bearish. So basically what we've got now going into New York is basically that's a flip zone. So we could look for sells from there going into New York. But yeah, it was a good session on euro dollar on it. Bit annoyed I missed the sell at the top, but yeah, I'm happy enough for that second trade. And just for the day that's in it, I'll go through AU as well. On the daily, we had this daily boss. So after the boss, you're expecting to pull back. We got the bearish chalk just at the dotted line, and then following the chalk, basically there's been a bit of a supply chain. You can see price sort of with these buy to sell wicks that were a flip zone. Price pushed down, pulled back in, mitigated them there, pushed down, and then we've pulled back into these wicks again. So ideally after the chalk, we'll see a daily pullback towards the EQ, which will be here. So maybe if it could pull down somewhere around here, it will be a great place to look for the next leg to the upside. Yeah, you can see we got the reaction to this sort of flip zone, but it does appear to have just been to facilitate a pullback into this sort of wicks. So it's very possible that we could continue bearish and see the pullback continue. The 4 hour, yeah, we got the bullish chalk on the 4 hour, basically coming off the daily demand. That's the chalk there. This supply had already all been sort of mitigated, but again, is a key detail. If you were to take this basically as all one sort of range, it was all price was contained by the range. So while the internal structure did turn bullish, we could easily still continue bearish from this supply. So for this reason, you have to be sort of nimble and be aware that the 4 hour is still bearish. So if the order flow is bearish in the M15, even if it is technically counter swing trend, it is still a good idea to be neutral and look to sort of trade the market both ways, because the 4 hour could, even though we had the internal structure switch bullish, we could still sort of run this week low, because that hasn't achieved much apart from the chalk. So that's sort of the key detail there. Even though the internal structure is bullish and we had this demand, I wasn't massively convinced that this was going to hold, just because I felt as though it was possible that the 4 hour had sort of completed its objective by filling up more orders within this supply, and then would likely continue the daily pullback. And then on the M15, yeah, the M15 was bullish after this here. This morning we had a bearish chalk on the M15, then we pulled back into this sort of flip zone, and it was the flip zone that caused the chalk, so it made sense that that held. Don't think there's any sells in that, if memory serves. So obviously M15 is bullish overall, internal is chalk bearish, but this zone here, it's a flip zone, caused the chalk. It's a high probability zone, but when there's a straight push like that there because of a news announcement and liquidity behind, I'm slightly less inclined to be super aggressive with it. Now, don't get me wrong, if there's a clean entry, I'm still going to hit it, because I'm aware that even though the internal is bearish, the swing is bullish and we could easily continue up here. But then when you factor in that you're coming off the 4 hour supply as well, you have to sort of be neutral and try to remember that you can trade the market both ways. Yeah, there was some nice buys as well from this POI here. The result in a loss, but it was definitely a valid setup. I'll go through them now. Yeah, this was where price came into sort of the buy to sell wicks just at the start of the session, and didn't really, just swept the high and then just tanked. It didn't really give an entry. Here, I know some of these are taking, we're looking at this entry, and it does just about meet the entry criteria. You could argue that's a sweep. So yeah, sorry. Yeah, so you could argue that you have the sweep, you have the chalk, and then price basically pulled back into the newly created demand that caused the chalk. But I just wasn't a massive fan. It's a bit too aggressive for me, because there's a lot of momentum coming down, and yeah, you get the chalk, you technically get the sweep, but I would rather have seen something really clear, sort of where, you know, you get a clear sort of price builds liquidity for a good few minutes and then sweeps it and then rinses everyone out and then pulls back in. I would have rather have seen something like that there, especially considering the lack of inducement in front of the POI and the equal lows behind. I was just sort of reluctant to take that aggressive an entry there. But it is valid if it meets your plan. Don't worry too much about it. It is pro M15 trend, so if you stick to the pro M15 trend stuff, you're going to come out on the right side of the market more often than not. After this end, price push lower, obviously swept the liquidity sort of behind here. I was sleeping on this trade. I don't know why. It just, in the moment, it didn't seem like a. At the moment, it didn't make. In the moment, it didn't make sense to me. But in hindsight, it was definitely a mistrade. It would have been a loss anyway. But yeah, you can see we mitigated the M15 POI. V shape, pull back, reacted to the supply. So then the reaction failed. More momentum to the upside. Chalk, so it's definitely valid. Obviously the flip didn't sweep, it was an inside bar just, but when the extreme was mitigated, like, it's more than valid to enter there. I don't really see where else you would enter unless you start dropping down to the 15 second, but I think in this case that'll be a bit much. Yeah, again, definitely valid loss. I didn't take it just because in the moment I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah, definitely valid and definitely a mistrade for me. This was the cleanest of the lot, sort of. We push down in, mitigated sort of more the extreme of the POI after liquidating this here low as well, and then sort of we got the little sweep. Price just wicked the low, and that's what I love seeing when you get a decent pullback. It's like when you think of, if you're looking for a liquidation, it's like you're basically looking for accumulated orders in the market where you can target both ways. So if you think of this scenario here, what's going on, you have the good 5 minute pullback, right? It pulls into this M1 supply, so you're going to have people basically shorting into M15 supply, which is mental, so their stops are going to be above here. And then equally, you're going to have people basically getting in here super aggressively, I don't know, in the seconds or whatever, or whoever they enter. So then basically, they're long there, people get short here from this supply, and then basically, the people that got long early get stopped out by this wick, and then the people that got short here too early, they got stopped out as well. So you're basically liquidation on both sides. Like, that's what I absolutely love to see with a liquidation. But it didn't pull back, unfortunately. That was the cleanest entry of the morning, but AU has a tendency to do that. none of these continuations met my plan because none of them swept. So it was just basically following order flow, but personally not something I would take. And then now this is where you have to go back out to the 15. We had this sort of, I had this refined to sort of this candle here, but I was aware that we had this sort of larger range and that supply was in control because, you know, pull back up, mitigated that supply, push down, caused the shock, pull back up, mitigated this flip zone, continue down. So supply was in control at this stage, the internal was bearish. So you have to be sort of, remind yourself that you're coming off 4 hour supply, 4 hours bearish, so you can trade counter the M15 following the supply chain. So just give you an idea here, there's no entry here on it, but just to show you this, it comes into sort of the range, comes in with a decent amount of momentum, and then we start to sort of, you can see demand fails there on the M1. So that's your first sort of sign, fails, pretty decent amount of momentum. Now you didn't get the shock to here, but had we got a pretty clean entry model there, I definitely would have shorted from there, just on account of it being pro the internal structure. Yeah, and then it just sort of trickled down. None of these really fit my plan. That one probably sort of did, but it was very towards the end of the session, and I didn't really fancy chasing it that much. And then you could have looked to take a confirmation entry from that there, but one didn't set up. So personally, I took my limit order off sort of after the first couple of M1 continuations held, because basically I was going to have to switch bearish to get back to the M1, and I was aware that we were pushing up towards M15 supply, so I just took my order off and then set an alert on it to try and play the reaction, but it obviously didn't set up. So that was AU. Yeah, this was the tidiest one. I missed this one. Fortunately, it turned out to be a loss, and then that there made sense. Vaguely met the criteria, but not something I would personally want to take. Yeah, so that is it. That is the 2 pairs done. I know a lot of you don't trade AU, so you can just fast forward through it or whatever you want, but I thought you might take some value from doing it as well. If you have any questions around, guys, just drop me a message in Discord or post it in one of the public channels, whatever, and I'll get back to you. Thanks, guys.